want to talk about the hustle, the being seen, the networking, all the glamorous things that people get the instant gratification from. Today, we're going to talk about quite the opposite. We're going to talk about what goes on behind the scenes, the real success, what actually builds the perseverance, what actually builds the character, and all that good stuff. So we're going to deep dive into all that today, and I just want to thank everyone for joining me today. And yeah, let's deep dive into it today. We're just going to really get into it because it's been bothering me that, today everyone kind of wants to talk about, all the glamorous parts of all the cool stuff, right? Which is, don't get me wrong, it all plays a role. I mentioned the networking, the hustle, the bustle, and, all the glamorous stuff that everyone sees every day. Yeah, we get that. But I think it leads to unrealistic expectations when people are kind of venturing to do their thing. One thing that I really would like to point on is, all the stuff that is done behind the scenes that's not on the cameras, that's not out in public, that's not out in, the world or whatever. It's the hard work that goes when nobody else is watching. For instance, right? We'll just jump right into it. When I was in the Army, yeah, sure, I jumped up rank pretty well, pretty fast, and I think I did a pretty okay job. But nobody's seen the hours that I put in behind the scenes. Sure, they've seen the day-to-day activities and everything that I was doing, and yes, it was probably more than most, but what they didn't understand is all the stuff that was also going on behind the scenes, right? The countless hours of, back then it was correspondence courses. I don't even know if the military even has those anymore. But I was doing tons of correspondence courses. I was doing tons of studying, tons of everything. Instead of going out to the bar, instead of going out with friends, I'd sit at home and I'd just do these things. And, that translates into just about everything else I've done in life. Transition from the military, I'm working on several businesses right now. I don't go out, I don't drink, I don't smoke, I kicked a lot of the bad habits and stuff that were keeping me in those cycles. So, nobody sees the countless hours I spend developing my websites and developing these concepts and ideas and building these foundational blocks and things that I'm doing with everything. You just see the video that I see right here, right? Well, all that kind of stuff takes, or all the, not just this video, but even the trips I go on or everything else. There's a lot of things that go into these things, and well, my trips are mostly just random, and then I just video them. But nonetheless, a lot of this stuff, like my DJ gigs, there's a lot of stuff that goes into that 1 hour, right? And I just want to put it out there, sometimes as new creators or, just anyone venturing off into building something, right? Nobody ever talks about what it took to build that. And a lot of times, you have to start out with sometimes your idea is not fully put together when you start, right? But you have to start. And then, oh, pardon me, I've been congested the last week or two, so it's one of those things. But it takes a lot that goes into it. You're constantly honing it as it's moving, right? I've done a lot of the work behind the scenes, where I'm creating my logos. I'm creating all the left and right boundaries of my businesses, right? Because I got my studio, the Studio Ascension. I got a clothing line. I got all these things I'm working on, and it's not all 100% out there yet, but it's getting there. But I'm doing all these things, and you're probably like, well, we'll probably hire somebody. And I'm like, well, I don't quite got the money yet for that kind of stuff. But one day I will have a team. But until then, it is what it is. But, going back to all these things that people are doing, and we all see these, the actors, the businessmen, everyone. Nobody ever wants to talk about, what it took for them to get there. And sure, sometimes it is a little bit of networking and, they hustle to get there. Sometimes they were just also planted there, and that is really a thing. But we're not going to get into that. But what you don't see is all the hard work and the sweat that they put into that kind of that stuff. Like even the bodybuilders. I like fitness. You know, I go to the gym every day, just about. I put in that work. An hour, hour and a half. Um, my eating, it's so. That depends on my financials, really. But that's a different story. But the thing is, like, man, nobody ever talks about what it took to actually get there, and everyone just sees the limelight, right? Because that's what sells. Well, the tough, the tough scenario and all that is understanding that you're gonna have these tough spots. There's gonna be times where people aren't clapping, and there's gonna be times that you just got to be able to build that character, that perseverance, and that internal strength, because that's where the real success comes from. And once you're able to get into the limelight, you're going to be able to maintain that long term if you have these things set into place. And of course, these are my ideas, and there are actually some scientists and some researchers that go into this to long term development. So, but what I'm getting at is you got to figure these things out because, well, I'll tell you right now, I've kind of figured out a lot of this stuff, and I'm going to share it with you guys because you know I get told all the time, like, man, you're making things look easy and la la la. Like, okay, cool, yeah, maybe I do, but you also didn't see the hours and hours and hours I put into it. You're just literally seeing me perform, or you're literally seeing this or that, or whatever the case is, right? But nobody ever wants to talk about it because it's not glorious. It's not fun spending countless hours on the computer adjusting, these video edits or the whatever the case is, adjusting music, building a song from start to finish for a project. Any of that stuff is not that glorious, so it doesn't sell. But when you watch, for those that are inspiring to be content creators or just any kind of creator in general, or anyone in the artistic world, you have to understand, like, your thought processes aren't linear like most people. They're kind of crazy and chaotic, but you have to keep it kind of in a bounds of some sort. So the main thing what I'm getting at with this is don't get discouraged because you're not getting that instant gratification. Like, oh yeah, this is awesome. Well, sometimes it's really not awesome. You just got to go through it though, because it is absolutely part of the process. And I absolutely hate this saying, but it says trust the process, right? Well, I hate that, to be honest. But that's a whole different story. We'll get into that maybe one day. But the thing is, if you're trying to build something, you're trying to build something long term and it's just sustainable. You know, I think you need to work on building in silence because, for one, what that does is it doesn't give people things to attack. Secondly, you get to celebrate your own wins by yourself. And sure, that may not be as fun as, going out and celebrating a win with some friends or whatever, but, sometimes friends get envious and jealous and just is what it is. And not everybody wants to see you succeed at things, whatever it may be, whether, you're a soccer player or a football player, basketball, you're an artist, you're a business person, you trade stocks, whatever the case is, right? You got to keep those wins and you got to learn to take those wins and internalize them and be like, okay, cool, boom, I won. Let's keep it going and moving without the outer, I guess, validation is what I'm looking for. Yeah, sure. Don't get me wrong. Everybody likes that little extra validation, I guess, or the slap on the back. Like, hey, good job. But I found in my life, at least, those weren't anything I was ever really actually looking for. I was just wanting to accomplish my task. And, everyone's always like, oh, you don't like this. You got to take the celebration. And I was like, well, no, I am internally celebrating. It's just there's a lot of things going on that I don't typically talk about. But my thing with all this is, you know, nobody's going to help you through those spots or those tough times, Um, and if they do, it's a rare thing. But I think in order to get to that point of being able to, I guess, internalizing all your wins and everything, you're like, well, you're talking about all this, but how do you actually do that? Well, how do you actually do that? That's something you just have to figure out, really. I sit here and I grind and grind and grind. I send out emails. Sometimes I give out some calls. I send DMs looking for different gigs or different opportunities, and half the time I don't even get a response back. And that could be discouraging. But within that, instead of looking at it as it being discouraging, you're just, okay, well, maybe that wasn't the one. You just keep going, right? And to me, that's my internal flame, so invested in what I'm trying to do and accomplish in life that it appears probably delusional to everybody else in life and that doesn't have that same goal or that whatever the case, right? So what I'm doing is I'm not just looking at like just reaching out to these people and blah blah blah, trying to make the connections and all this other networking or the whatever the case. What I'm doing is building that internal fortitude that is allowing me to continue even when people are saying no, because not getting a response is also no. But also look at it as like you're not getting a response, just open up another opportunity elsewhere. But you got to be able to take these, and if you can't get past these type things, and this is just one thing that I'm talking about, right? And I probably got 25 different scenarios where this same kind of instance is relevant. Like photography gigs, DJ gigs. Even when, so years ago, I was going to do some powder coating, open my own shop, and all this other stuff. And I was getting zero support from people that I thought I would have support from, and that was some of my closest friends. And they didn't understand it because they didn't understand also how much work I was putting into it. Because we as people that are trying to create something, we're super passionate about what we're doing typically. And it shows in that, but nobody that's passionate about it also, or not passionate about it, they don't understand that from that perspective that we expect them to. And what happens there is we get discouraged as the people creating, and we stop doing things. We just kind of, some people do anyway. You don't get over that kind of stuff, and it kind of, you react negative to it, and it halts your progress. But internally, if you're able to accept that okay, well, they didn't like it, or maybe they did like it and they just didn't know how to respond, or whatever the case was, you didn't get any gratification from a thanks or a good job or a pat on the back or that's a great object or a great idea or whatever the case, you just got to keep going forward with it. You gotta be able to accept the fact that sometimes you can have the greatest idea and nobody's going to acknowledge it. And sometimes that could be happening for several reasons. Maybe they don't want to just give you that gratification because they're just that type of person, or they just don't like it and you just don't get that gratification. It's just one of those things that, sorry, I keep looking out because my neighbor's over there. But you gotta be able to move through these things and just continue to go, and over long-term periods, this builds a internal strength that is really required for long-term success. Sure, it's great to have that one viral video, or that one moment where you scored a bunch of money on a deal or something, but can you repetitively repeat that over a long distance of time, and I think that's where success happens. Sure, you were successful in that one moment, and maybe that was not your intention to be successful over a long time. Maybe you just wanted that one score, and that's perfectly fine also. But the thing is, to build like what I'm trying to do, build a successful empire that lasts for years beyond me, and I want it to be able to sustain itself. So I'm working so hard behind the scenes that nobody ever sees, and maybe I should do some behind the scenes stuff of what I'm doing working. Maybe just go live of just me working on a project. It's not glamorous. I don't typically cut too many things out of a video, so it's just like, I don't shorten it up to make it super exciting, because you could do that. You can make it short, suspenseful, and all this other stuff by just editing and doing a bunch of different things and catching people's attention. But, I'd like to build something that was sustainable, not just an attention grabber. And that's why, I invest so much time in everything, because there's a lot of knowledge out there that nobody really is maybe kind of comprehending, because everyone just wants that glamorous catch somebody's attention type thing. And I don't think that's sustainable, because look at it in big business, right? You have like the real estate. You have real estate. You got a bunch of all these different types of businesses, right? None of those are glamorous. You got construction jobs. You got this and that, and the blue collar trades. There's a lot of opportunity and money in those, and nobody ever talks about that because it's not a glamorous thing. The flashy cars, the flashy diamonds, the flashy houses, the big houses, the being on TV, the big trips, all that stuff. Yeah, that's cool, but I want to know, and it's always inspired me, like, how did you get to be that way to make it to that point? Or did that just happen? Or is that just for show? Because, I've come across, for instance, motorcycle riding. We'll just go with that one. That, I looked out. I didn't really look at anybody for inspiration, really, for why I ride, because most of that is all internal for me anyway. And it's my clarity, and, it does that kind of stuff for me. But, I ride a lot, or I used to. And I don't have my bike at the moment, so that's kind of not on me right now. But, I look at these things, and man, there's people out there that only ride when the camera's on, and it's kind of how it is. So be careful when you, for those of you that look up to people out there that are on camera and stuff like that. I'm not saying anything bad about anybody by no means, but sometimes people only ride when they're. Now, don't get me wrong, that there are some other times that they don't ride, or they do ride, but, and I'm not talking about anyone in particular personally, but there's a lot of people that just do things just for the clout, and it is what it is. It's advertising, it's marketing, whatever the case. But I generally do these things a lot because I just enjoy doing things, but that's because I've built a foundation that doesn't rely on outside validation type stuff. And, nobody's going to tell you got to do all the paperwork. You got to get all the subscriptions. You got to do all these other types of things that just keep things rolling. You got to reach out to investors. You got to reach out and get, deals and all these other types of things. Nobody tells you about any of that stuff, but that's the stuff that happens behind the doors that you don't see, because they don't want you to see it, because they just want you to buy into this system, right? So for anyone out there inspiring to do anything, do a little bit of extra research, reach out. You're more than welcome to reach me at the Rust Compass, and we'll walk you through some of this stuff. But at the same time, look at it at a realistic, in a realistic light. And I'm not saying it couldn't be unrealistic, because a lot of things are unrealistic until they become realistic. So don't underestimate the working in silence, the keeping it to yourself. Don't tell people your plans, because I've talked to people about some of my plans, and they absolutely did everything they could to destroy those plans. They copied me, they stole my ideas, they've done all kinds of stuff, and it's just kind of ridiculous, really. It's like, man, get your own idea. It's like but to me, ideas come and go quickly and a lot. So it's not that big of a deal to me, but in the grand scheme of things, it is. It's like your character, really. But the main thing here, that I really want to talk about today was that that quiet success that you build in silence, that nobody sees. Nobody sees the hard work. Like, I wake up in the morning or afternoon, whenever I wake up, and I work from the time I'm up to the time I go to sleep, and that takes a lot on me. And in order to, in the world of that kind of chaos, the best thing I've been able to do is go on a drive, go do these, hikes or something, because that's where it opens up a lot of clarity for me, instead of just immersing myself in everything. Sometimes you gotta take a break from it to gain so much more insight on it. It's kind of weird how it works, but the psychology and the neuroscience of it is just kind of amazing, really, if you're into that kind of thing. But yeah, man, that's what I hope everyone's success. But you got to really look at it and kind of determine how strong is your internal self. Because if you're just worried about that instant gratification, or if you're not willing to play, we'll use a DJ term type stuff, right? If you won't play in front of an empty dance floor, you know, what's going to happen when you're jamming in front of a large crowd, and then everyone just starts booing you? Like, you won't know what to do. That internal strength is built when you're by yourself. You're not amped up on the crowd's energy. That you got to have that own internal energy. You got to fill into your own cup. And a lot of the years I didn't understand that. So, because they're like, well, you can't help other people, Will, if you don't have your own cup full. It's like, no, I help everyone all the time. Just, yeah, my cup's not full, but I still help. But, the realization of that is, you got to still put into yourself as much as you do other people and stuff. So, if not more, actually. And, this kind of what I've learned in life, So, and I love sharing stuff that I've learned in life. Just like all this stuff that, all the behind the scenes things and putting it all together, and, just, it's all coming together, and it's really hard sometimes, man. Like, sometimes I don't know how I'm going to feed myself, and I'm out on my own. I'm sure I could reach out to family or whatever, but I don't like reaching out to anybody, really, because I do have a plan to make this all on my own. So, and I try not to involve people in my problems anyway, but it just happens sometimes. But yeah, guys, I just would like to say, man, when you take on any kind of adventure, a venture that you have, for your future or whatever, just keep in mind that don't discredit those times that nobody's clapping. Those are some very powerful times, and I think you need to harness those. And um, yeah, man, it's just, those are the most important moments, and it's not the moments that are out in public and you're in the limelight and you're shining. Those are like happy, sure, validations moments, but the real strength and the real wins are, how did you handle nobody clapping? How did um, you handle getting through something that you had zero help with? Were you able to navigate that yourself? How were you able to obtain that clarification? For me, like I said, I go hiking or something, and everything just kind of flows to me. So, or just hiking is an example, because that's what I went yesterday. I went hiking and got some clarity through things, and also realized that I was way out of shape for that hike that I did, but I still managed it, so it was good. But anyway, that's all for today, guys, and I hope everyone has a wonderful week. And I do want to say that I will be this Thursday. If you haven't been noticing on my TikTok, I've been DJing live, but I will be doing my Stellar Vibes radio that I'm now officially announcing. That's going to be coming out. I'll have a channel for it, and we'll get that going. It'll be just an hour of DJing or 2 hours or whatever it is. Uh, just hanging out, vibing, and talking music and kind of similar stuff here, but just be doing it with music and DJing and doing all kinds of cool stuff. So I appreciate everyone. Thank you for watching. And again, I'm Will, the host, and this is the Rusty Compass.